What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. I am very, very excited because every time we do this show, we have incredible guests, and today is no different. I have Rob Costa on here today, and Rob is an expert at really showing and sharing how do you turn your agency into a self-sufficient business. He's been doing this for a very long time, and his wisdom is going to give you guys some insights that you really can't get anywhere else. So, Rob, thank you so much for being on.
Great. I'm delighted to be here. Is my grey hair giving me away that I've been doing this for such a long time?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit, but no, it's very exciting to hear from you and to understand how do you kind of help these agencies become a lot more self-sufficient, because it's a problem that we all face when we run our agencies. So, as we always do with the show, let's start with your not so humble bragging rights. So in other words, what have you been able to do for your clients? What have you been able to do for your business? Why should people tune in and listen to you?
Yeah, I guess three things. First of all, there's a ton of agency consultants, agency coaches out there. But I feel like I'm someone that has lived this. So I started, grew and sold my own agency before becoming a coach. So I can kind of empathize with my clients. One thing I'm super proud of is like I really preach about building the self-running agency. But having had a bunch of clients that could actually achieve this, that could actually end up only working in their agency for sort of 2 days a week or 3 or 4 days a month and pursue their other interests is something I'm super proud of. And I guess the last thing, which kind of brings us in right up to date, is just the way AI is changing and evolving and how I'm kind of grasping that, especially as I come towards the end of my career and I want to have my knowledge available to people on an ongoing basis. So that's perhaps another topic for another day. But those are, I guess, the three things I'm most proud of at the moment. And one other thing actually is the thing I'm most proud of running my own agency is the number of people who I gave a start to their career and they're now flying in their careers.
Oh, that's a good one. Most people don't talk about, the employees that they've had and the impact that they've had on specific people. And it really does make a difference when you're able to grow something and mentor people along the way. It's pretty cool. So walk us through the journey. Walk us through a little bit of the ups and downs, and how did you get to it, the coaching side of things? What kind of made you say I'm gonna do this?
Yeah. Okay. So back in 1992, before you were definitely, a lot of people were born, I was in a marketing manager for a software company, and we were selling, ironically, the company called AI International, and we were selling complex object-oriented solutions. And we kept trying to hire marketing agencies, but they just didn't get it. So as a young 24-year-old whose career wasn't going to go much further with that company because they were small, I thought, you know what, I'm going to leave and start my own agency because these guys don't understand complex technology. So I'm going to focus my agency on technology. And my naive, arrogant, whatever you want to call it, innocent youth kind of led me to do that without much hesitation. And over the next 11 years, we grew the business to 25 staff, turning over about £1.5 million. That's about $1.8 million. And, had a fantastic time doing it, learned a ton along the way. And like most people, learned most of my lessons by making mistakes. By 2003, for various reasons, I was kind of fed up with running the business. We had this big office. I sat in the corner and I felt like every day my team or my clients were bringing their wheelbarrows of crap and piling it at my desk. And I thought, this isn't why I started my own business. So put the business up for sale. After about 18 months, we had 2 buyers. So picked one that was the best match. Did a 2-year earnout, which was, like, for many people, a very unpleasant experience. We were bought by a Midwestern big agency in the US, very culturally different and just not very enjoyable, but I learned a ton. Left there and thought, what on earth am I going to do with the rest of my life? And then a few things conspired, and I guess the universe conspired and said, hey, Rob, you would be a good coach. And that's the thing that you really enjoyed when you were running your agency, is about enabling people and empowering people. And so I went and trained, and then in 2007 started this current business. And I guess up to near towards the pandemic, most of my work was done in a traditional way, sort of on client premises, one-to-one coaching or working with management teams. And then the pandemic came along and sort of changed all of that. And that's when I got into my kind of group coaching program and thought a lot about what were the mistakes I made and what were the things I see time and time again with agencies where they get to a certain point where they're just bashing their heads against a brick wall and they just cannot get over that next stage of growth. And that's what sort of led me to coin the phrase the self-running agency, because I think that is what a lot of people aspire to build. And that doesn't necessarily mean an agency that they can run entirely without them, but it does mean an agency that there's a less of a correlation between how involved the owner is and how successful the agency is.
So walk me through a little bit of what that looks like. You kind of went through this journey of you built your agency, you grew it to the 7-figure mark, and then you decided, okay, this isn't necessarily for me. There's probably a better way to kind of take this to another level. So, okay, you decided to partner with another bigger agency. You learned a whole lot. But then walk me through what exactly clients come to you for. As you said in the very beginning, there's lots of agency consultants. There's lots of people out there who are helping agencies. So why do people come to you specifically?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, as I said at the beginning, part of it is because I can genuinely empathize with where they're at because I've stood in their shoes at some point. Most of the agencies I work with are somewhere between startup and say £5 million or $6-7 million. That's sort of my sweet spot, and so I sort of understand what it's like to be there. And they're either coming to me because they are starting out and they just don't want to make mistakes, so they want some help from someone that can help them get to where they want to get quicker. Or, as I said, they've been an owner of an agency and they're kind of tired because they keep bashing their heads against the brick wall, and no matter what they do, they can't get over that next stage of growth. I think we all know that there are various kind of trigger points along an agency's journey at different stages where they have to make an investment to get to that next stage. And the investment might be in systems and processes and people and technology and those physical things, or they might be in training and development. So, we just have to identify what they are. So I'm typically working with the owner or the leadership team of an agency who wants to grow to the next stage and has ambitions to do that, but hasn't been successful doing it so far, or wants some guidance to make that journey as painless as possible. So that's kind of why, when and why people would approach me.
And what do you diagnose? Like, how do you then identify, okay, well, what is the stage that they're at, and how do they get to the stage where they want to go? What's your kind of process to help, pinpoint, okay, this is exactly what you need to work on?
Yeah, well, I think you probably know as well as I do, and all your listeners know as well, that often people come to you and tell you they've got challenge A, but when you look under the hood you do a bit of fact finding and deep diving, you find that it's not A at all. A is just a symptom because they haven't solved B. So, we need to take a big deep dive first of all, which means talking and interviewing all the key stakeholders in the agency. One of the things that I always start with is I ask my clients, do they have a plan? And they'll often say, yes, Rob, I've got a plan. I say, great, can you present it to me, please? And they'll present to me a plan. And usually it's a finance plan and maybe a people plan, but they haven't really looked at their agency from a holistic kind of 360-degree way. So that's the first thing we're going to work on typically is like, let's get a plan that looks at all aspects of your agency, from obviously finance, from people, from systems and processes, from your product, from your clients, from your sales, from your marketing, and your culture and your scale and all that stuff. So we need to look at all of those aspects. And so a first starting point is going to be, they're going to come to me and tell me that they've got a problem. I'm going to go, great, let's just look under the hood. Let's do a bit of fact finding to ascertain more detail about that. That will often lead us down a slightly different path. And then a good starting point is to say, okay, well, let's get a plan, because we can solve the problem you've got today. But if you don't have a clear roadmap of where you want to be in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2-3 years time, then you are going to be at the mercy of external factors constantly. You're going to be pulled in 20 different directions. You're going to get seduced by shiny objects, and you're going to forget quickly where the destination is. And if I'm honest, with you, Mikhail, that's what happened to me when I ran my agency. So much of what I teach now is stuff that I didn't do. Although we got to 1.5 million, 25 staff back in the 90s, it at times was really painful because I didn't know any of this stuff. I mean, even back then, coaching wasn't a well-known thing. You thought, you knew sports people had a coach, but businesses didn't have a coach. And surely you only have a coach when you've got a problem. And of course, that isn't true at all, because sports people at the top of their game have a whole bunch of coaches to keep them at the top of their game. So anyway, so that's sort of the starting point, I think, with my clients. And it's good to start at the top and work down rather than to start in the weeds, trying to solve the problem with the weeds, where you're not really getting to the source of the problem. You're just dealing with an outcome of a particular challenge that they've got right now.
What is a self-sufficient agency?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's an aspiration, as I said earlier. I think this is the journey. I don't know if you can relate this or agree with me with what you see, but people start their agency. They're super entrepreneurial. They're not very good at letting go. They're control freaks. They start their business because they want flexibility, freedom, and control, but often they give up freedom at the mercy of wanting control. And so they find everything is dependent on them. And then they quickly find that they're working for a boss that's much tougher than the one they had when they were an employee. And so what we've got to do is we've got to get work off their plate. And often what happens as you grow as an agency is that the first hires you make are fairly junior, because you don't have a ton of money. So if you're growing organically, you're going to hire people, but they're going to be junior. And if you're not careful, you see this big gap appearing between you and your team, and you find yourself constantly swooping in to rescue clients, rescue financial situations, try and stop over servicing, all of that kind of stuff. So building a self-running agency means dealing with all of that stuff, and it means getting as much work off your plate as you can, so that you as the agency owner can focus on your superpower, which is, leading the agency, which is probably business development and being the figurehead and setting the strategy. What it isn't is being the client service manager, being the delivery person. It's not that, and it certainly isn't being the admin person who's writing the reports and doing all of that stuff. So to build a self-running agency, we've got to change the mindset of the owner, first of all, to realize that they aren't the best person to do everything, and to stop them thinking that, if people don't do it as well as me, it's not going to be good enough. That's the wrong question they're asking. So we've got to teach them to delegate, and then we've got to help them have this roadmap so they can create the right structures, whether that be the right people, the right systems and processes in their agencies, so that ultimately they can make themselves redundant, so they can focus on the things that they love to do, or even do other things. I have one client that when I met them, they were about an 18-person agency, and the owner has this real passion for photography. In fact, he has exhibitions around the world, and he's published this amazing book, but he just didn't have enough time to do that. So his reason for building a self-running agency was to have some time to follow that passion. And, after a few years, we got him to exactly that place where he can spend 3 days a week doing that and 2 days a week kind of working in his agency.
Yeah, I think there's different challenges across the different levels of an agency. And for example, in the early days, it's really tough for agency owners to kind of switch, right? Because what happens is they do business development, they get a client, and then they're like, well, somebody's got to deliver for this client. So they then start to work, and they start to get some stuff done. Maybe they have a couple freelancers to outsource some stuff. But then their pipeline starts to run dry, and that client leaves, and now they got to switch back, right? And that cycle is very, very different than the cycle when, okay, I've got an account manager, I've got stage 2, stage 3, I've got most of my people delivering. Maybe I still have to come up with strategy, maybe I still have to be involved, but at least the heavy lifting can be handled by somebody else. So walk me through what that means in terms of a self-sufficient agency at these kind of various stages from your perspective.
Well, let's pick it up on that stage, because the next thing that you have to do is you have to start putting a leadership team in place. So at that stage where you have got a team of 5, 10, 15 staff, we still often see this big gap between the owner and the rest of the company. So we've got the owner, who's the figurehead, who's the visionary, the strategist, and then we've got a team of client service delivery people here. And we haven't got there's a big gap that appears between them. So we've got to plug that gap first of all, and then we've got to build a leadership team. Because if I'm working on a plan for the year, for example, well, I don't want to be the only person. If I'm the owner, I don't want to be the only person that writes that plan. And I don't want to be the only person that's focused on delivering it. And indeed, from a cultural perspective, if I am writing that plan and telling everyone what it is, then there's a really good chance people are not going to buy into it. So I need a leadership team at that stage who are going to sit down with me every month, and we're going to have a strategic meeting, i.e. a meeting where we're looking at the plan and looking at what's next, rather than discussing client A or employee B. So that's the next stage, I think, in the journey, is get a strong second tier of leaders in your agency that have the wherewithal and the ability to not only kind of straddle the client delivery space, but also straddle the space of being strategic, both for clients and for the agency as well.
What do you tell people when the excuse is cash flow? So here's what happens, right? Level one, I get a client, I pay myself, I do the work. That income really is there to support my bills, right? So now I'm in this cycle. So now, in order for me to remove myself from the delivery and start outsourcing, I've got to figure out how to do that. It's tricky for a lot of people. Okay, say I'm able to outsource, I can build some margin. Typically, your biggest expense, and agencies usually operate at a 20% ish, maybe on the high end 30% margin. Typically, when you get to that third stage, which is I've got a delivery team, I'm still doing a lot of the sales, and I've got to now hire my exec team. Now these expenses are overhead expenses, which means they're not cheap, right? So how do you help somebody figure that out?
If someone tells me we're really busy, but we can't afford to put that exec team in place, then I'm going to say we need to look at your pricing. So I think, first of all, get super, super clear about who your ideal target client is, because your ideal target client isn't someone that fits in your niche, but is going to argue about pricing all the time or lead with pricing. So get super clear about your ideal client, what makes you different, who you are and what you offer, and then look at your pricing. Because your pricing, if you can't afford to start this, and obviously it's organic, I'm not saying like, let's go and hire 5 people for an exec team in one go, because that you wouldn't be able to do that. But if we're talking about hiring a senior person, that first senior person, and they're telling me, well, Rob, I can't afford to do that. We just need to dig a bit deeper and look at pricing, because they're probably too cheap. Look at who their ideal target client is, and double down on reaching out to those people. I think it's so interesting that I know we're not really talking about this now, but money and pricing, I absolutely believe, is 50% getting the right strategy in place and 50% mindset. Because people are like, oh yeah, but I can't possibly, you don't understand. How many times I've been told this, Mikhail, Rob, you don't understand. We're unique. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. I've been in this game for 30 plus years. I've heard it all before. Everyone thinks they're special. Everyone thinks they're unique. And the reality is they're not. You've got to tackle your mindset around pricing to charge the fees that are equitable to the value that you deliver your clients.
Yeah, no, I hear it all the time too. Oh, well, my market won't pay those prices. It's like, okay, yeah, if that's the case, then they probably wouldn't be in business, because at the end of the day, if they want the outcome.
What I do in that scenario is try and show them someone in their space that is charging the pricing that they think they can't charge, because everyone thinks they're unique.
No, exactly. Or they say, well, my customer's customer is, or my client's customer is worth very little, so it's hard for me to justify a big price. Okay, well, it's an interesting conversation for sure.
Well, and also you kind of want to be devil's advocate and say, well, maybe you're not in the right space then.
Yeah, it may be, depending on where you're at. So we're coming up on time here. This has been kind of very helpful to get people to understand the different stages of these agencies. and what they have to tackle around in order for them to make it a more self-sufficient agency. Anything you want to quickly just high level summarize before I ask you our favorite question that every marketer loves, because every marketer to some degree loves shiny objects, which is, what is your best growth tactic?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I would say to everybody listening to this, based following off what we just said, is that 50% of running a successful agency is getting the right strategy, and 50% is your mindset. So challenge your mind, not just about pricing, but about everything, about that whole thing. I couldn't possibly hand this client over to somebody else because the client wants me and they will leave. All those mindset, all those stories that we tell ourselves, all the imposter syndrome things that get in your way and stop you putting yourself out there. That's what I'd say to people, is like, challenge your mindset. It is possible. You just have to be willing to step out of your comfort zone. As I say, step out of your comfort zone into your learning zone, and then, feel the fear and do it anyway. And before you know it, you feel comfortable doing those new things.
Totally. So tell me your best growth tactic.
Okay, well, maybe I've got three, but first, and they follow on from a lot of what I've said. As soon as you possibly can, delegate. Get work off your plate as soon as you possibly can, even if it's to a VA in the Philippines, or, a developer in India, or a freelancer, whoever it is. Get work off your plate. Know what an hour of your time is worth, and then get all of the tasks that are worth less than that off of your plate. I call it the notional hourly rate, and know what that is and get other work off your plate. And in that respect, when you can afford it, hire people that are better than you. You don't need to know everything, and you shouldn't think you need to know everything. Again, mindset. So hire people better than you. And my last piece of advice, this came out of my call yesterday with my group, is that we are bombarded with shiny objects of all the latest sales and marketing strategies and AI tools and new social media channels. But
here I am asking you for one.
Yeah, but the reality is, although they're fantastic and you should look at them, the reality is that the traditional sales and marketing tactics still work really well. Email marketing still works really well. Networking and speaking and conferences, whether they're virtual or in person, still work really well. So don't ignore the traditional sales and marketing strategies because there's some sexy new AI thing over here.
Totally. I'm with you. I fully agree. There's always some new tactics. It's funny. I've done this show, and I keep saying this because so far, maybe one or two, but so far out of the 20 plus, almost kind of approaching 25 episodes of this show, not a single person has said the exact same growth tactic, which shows you that you're bombarded with different tactics, different things that you could do, and the truth is they all work, right? And you just have to double down and apply it, and actually be dedicated.
Let me give you a suggestion. When you hit episode 100, take all of the growth tactics that everyone's shared with you and put them in some kind of guide or something, because that will be worth a lot of money. Because none of us are right or wrong, right? We just have different views and different experiences.
Exactly. And that's what it comes down to. My growth tactic would be completely different than somebody else's, as long as it works and you're willing to apply it, and you're willing to experiment, because nothing works the first time. Rob, thank you so much for sharing. Where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, the best place really is head over to, two places. Head over to my website, which is Costa Coaching, DACOSTA, coaching.co.uk. Tons of information on there. You can get in touch with me. But having said everything I said, I'm also really heavily into AI. So if you want to chat with my AI clone, that's someone that you can actually have a physical conversation with me on my video, or you can have a call with me or chat on text. Just head over to clone.dacostacoaching.co.uk, and you can have interact with me there as well and learn more about me there.
That is pretty sweet. I'm actually going to check that out just because I'm curious, and that sounds pretty fun. Thank you so much for sharing, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Raquel.